do we know how long like Moses didn't they live longer back then too? Like some of them lived for like a couple hundred years or something, supposedly
Not in the time of Moses.
before him.
The maximum age during the time of Moses was about, I believe there was a priest named Jehoiada who lived about 130 years, it says somewhere, but that's about the maximum when you get to Moses. But prior to, so Moses is after the Hebrews were slaves in Egypt, right? And again, depending on whether you take a long sojourn or short sojourn view, the long sojourn says they stayed in Egypt for 400 years. The short sojourn view says they stayed in Egypt for 230 years. But prior to that, Jacob was one of the patriarchs who moved his whole family to Egypt. And he lived, Genesis says he lived to be 147 years. And then Isaac was Jacob's father, who was said to live 185 years. And then Abraham was Isaac's father, and he's said to live 175 years. And so that at that point, yeah, you're getting into ages that we definitely don't see today.
And that would probably be the longest would be 175 that we know of as like Abraham.
No, if you go back farther in the Genesis record, so in Genesis 5, the oldest one that it says would be Methuselah at age 969.
Wow. Okay. And have we been able to prove that through like geological records or whatever? Like, has anybody tried to either prove this or disprove this in terms of like scientists and stuff? Do we know this aging thing?
Well, that's hard to prove or
Yeah.
disprove.
Yeah.
Obviously, most scientists would not believe that based on just what we observe today. So we observe today that people don't live that long, and they would say, well, that means they didn't live that long back then either. But
Yeah.
in terms of science, it's very difficult because we're not even sure why people age yet scientifically. It's kind of a everyday thing. You wouldn't think that, but aging is a very complicated process that scientists don't really understand very well yet. I have
Yeah.
a whole set of YouTube videos on this, exploring how people age and why I think it's possible humans could live that long.
Very, very interesting. And is everything that whole subject is very interesting. And is everything you do online in terms of YouTube and your podcast, is it all Christian based, or do you ever go into anything that's just like biochem based or something else that maybe doesn't really have to do as much with religion?
I would say it's probably mostly religion based. I mean, I like I said, my interest is the intersection of science and the Christian theology. So it's usually an intersection of both science and theology, Bible stuff. So, but yeah, on my YouTube channel, I have several videos about the aging question and things like that.
Okay, so and in terms of the age, sorry, I cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Okay, and in terms of the aging question, what's your belief for why they live longer? Would you say it has to do maybe something with the like the ozone layer type thing, like, or the Earth was just more clean back then type thing?
No, not specifically. Mostly, it's probably due to genetic degradation. I would say. So mutations build up, and certain mechanisms that human beings were created with by God at the beginning broke down over time. And so God, in the Bible, in the first chapters of Genesis, it says human beings were supposed to live forever in the Garden of Eden. And in order to live forever, there was a tree of life that they would eat from.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then when they sinned, God kicked them out of the garden and they could no longer eat from the tree of life, and that meant that they were going to die. And so the first several generations in Genesis 5 lived to be about 900 years before they died. And then the flood happens, and then the ages of the people after the flood drop precipitously. So Noah, who went through the flood, lived to be 950 years. His son Shem lived to be 600. And then the 3 generations after that were about 400. 3 generations after that were about 200. And then you get down to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which we already said. So my view on that is that most of that is due to degradation of the genes. So certain mechanisms that we used to have got broken through mutations for various reasons. And some of those reasons might be environmental. So like you said, the hole in the ozone, there's actually one of my more speculative hypotheses has to do with how the Earth's magnetic field might have been almost zero during and shortly after the flood, because it was rapidly reversing in polarity. So you know how if you take a compass, right, and the needle points north because of the magnetic North Pole. Well,
Yeah.
And this is not controversial, by the way. Everybody agrees that there have been reversals of that polarity in the magnetic field in the past. If you want, I can talk about the evidence for that. But everybody agrees that polarity reversals have happened in the past. The question is when they happened and how fast that we would disagree on. So the young Earth view would say that the polarity reversals occurred shortly after the flood, about 4,400 years ago, and they happened very rapidly and then slowed down. And so the thing about polarity reversals is when they're reversing, the magnetic field is very, very weak, and it doesn't protect the Earth from cosmic rays like it does today. And so cosmic rays would come and they would hit the surface of the Earth at a much higher rate than they do today. And we know that causes mutations, for example. Another thing it probably did was, it's a complicated process, but it would ionize oxygen molecules in the air. And the result of that would be that the oxygen that is ionized gets kicked out of the atmosphere. And so it could actually probably reduce, without the magnetic field protecting the Earth, the rays from the sun, right? The rays from the sun that are normally pretty damaging would be knocking oxygen out of the atmosphere of the Earth. And so my hypothesis is that it reduced the concentration of oxygen in the Earth's atmosphere. And that's actually based on a secular paper. So not creationists hypothesize that this might have happened during one of the 6 major mass extinction events that's in the old Earth time scale. So if I say, so in this field, right, if I say secular, that means like non-Christian, sort of what you meant, non-Christian. So that would mean the old Earth, 4.5 billion years old, 13.8 billion years for the universe, and all that, and the whole evolutionary timeline, right? So if I said it's secular, that's what that means. So there's a secular paper that suggested that one of the mass extinctions in the old Earth timeline was caused by this mechanism, where the magnetic field was too weak to protect the Earth from cosmic rays or the rays of the sun, and it knocked a bunch of oxygen out of the Earth's atmosphere, and that reduced the oxygen concentration in the atmosphere to the point that certain types of animals that needed more oxygen just died out. But I suggest that could have happened shortly after the flood, which could cause mutations. It would increase rates of mutations, cause perhaps extinctions after the flood, stuff like that. That's kind of a short version.
No, that's fine. Yeah, I'm glad you did this short one. I don't know if I'd be able to comprehend the long one,